Right. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us at the summit today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's fantastic. I'm really enjoying it.
So a quick sort of introduction to you. You became chair of BAFTA last year.
Yeah, 9 months ago.
Indeed. And you've been deputy chair before that, since 21. You are on the advisory board for the British Film Council. You sit on the board for the Film and Television Charity,
Yep.
and you've previously been on the board of Women in Film and Television. And on top of all of that, as Michelle introduced, you established and run a very successful agency representing, particularly behind the camera, talent. Throughout that period and through all the roles, the development of talent has been key and something you've been very passionate about, and further, both development of talent within industry and getting people into industry. You've seen a lot of change. I mean, one of the things that always fascinates me about the entertainment industries is how much it keeps evolving and moving on. But the last 10 years or so has seen a particular shift from what has been described in many ways from a gatekeeper economy into a more of a thriving creator economy, which brings sort of with it various opportunities, but also challenges for established media. Layered on that many of the roles now are less siloed. People occupy multiple roles on projects, and the sheer wealth of content means there is intense competition for audience. So I suppose to start the conversation really is how do we support the creative talent now within industry to respond to all of this change and to ultimately create the content that audiences are seeking and want to engage with?
And 3 hours later, I think the first word actually that springs to mind in all the work I've been lucky enough to do over 3 decades, and particularly my work at BAFTA, is community. First, you have to build the community, and out of communities, amazing things happen. You know, I would certainly agree, as an agent, what I have seen, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, is a real shift from those who had very kind of linear and hierarchically based careers moving through an area of one of the industries, that now people are, as you say, they're not waiting for permission anymore. They're creating content, they're creating stories, they're finding different ways of connecting those stories to an audience. I was talking to a young producer the other day, and she was telling me about this, out in China, they have this sort of micro drama, and it's released on mobile phones in 1-minute segments. And there's sort of 50, 60 episodes at a time of this, but being released in 1-minute segments. It's incredibly popular. It's making the creators a lot of money. So there's so much really interesting stuff happening out there. And I think in terms of BAFTA, just to give a little bit of context, I think a lot of people probably still here in this room think of BAFTA as a very glamorous red carpet awards ceremony body. And we are that, and that is absolutely our shop front, and we are very proud to be that. But we are actually a charity. And the 3 words that, inform my work at BAFTA and what I believe BAFTA to be about is about celebrating, inspiring, and supporting. And therefore, in this very, very ever-changing world where the pace of change almost seems to be increasing exponentially, BAFTA has this unique position because we're a tri-sector academy, because we cover film, TV, and games. So what we can do is use that to kind of cross-pollinate, because what we're certainly starting to see is people who work in film and TV, and the barriers between those two have very much broken down over the last few years, but are also starting to work in games now, composers, cinematographers. I was talking to an actor's agent the other day, and she was telling me about one of her young actors who is really being able to build a sustainable career because she has a part on a game. She does, the mocap, she does the voice, and she can also therefore afford to go and work in theatre as well. So BAFTA can really work in that sort of tri-sector way. I think we can also very much we have a series of sort of talent programs, talent initiatives to help people at every stage of their career, from sort of bursaries and scholarships at entry level through BAFTA Breakthrough and BAFTA Elevate. And, therefore we can really help through community and those talent acceleration programs to enable people to build sustainable careers. Because I think in an economy that is predominantly based on freelance talent, that can be extremely challenging. And then the third way, I think, is very much about authenticity and us making sure and encouraging by highlighting, excellence in these areas that, if it's a story about any section of society, they are getting to tell that story. Nothing about us without us. And there are so many examples of that in the films that we honour and get nominated and win awards, that they are, often based on authentic experience of those filmmakers.
And it feels very much that the more you understand the audience you're trying to reach, what their values are, what they're motivated by, what they're interested in, the more success you are likely to achieve, both in sort of like reflecting, being more creating authentic content, but reflecting sort of like what they are seeking. I think so. Like we talked obviously with the first panel today. We had Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and there's been a lot of column inches about the show, and obviously very successful. And in some ways, the fact that it has been successful perhaps is and took so many people by surprise across industry is perhaps still an indicator that we probably still need to do more to understand what it is that audiences are seeking, what they're passionate about, what they would like to consume. But then sort of there is, as this sort of like the content creation has evolved, there are a lot of other organizations now also interested in impact and the impact that entertainment can have, who are becoming content creators themselves, not from the traditional entertainment industries, whether it's from the charity sector or far wider. And either they're creating the content themselves or interested in working with those in the entertainment industries. It feels like there's a real opportunity there, an opportunity for meaningful collaboration. And do you see, both in sort of like from your point of view and from BAFTA, there's sort of like there's an opportunity to advance those collaborations, to develop sort of like relationships more with people from outside and organizations from outside the traditional entertainment industries, I suppose for more conversational, less transactional sort of interactions for that greater impact? Yeah,
very, very much so. I think there's, a lot BAFTA can still learn from many other organisations, not directly in the mainstream of film, TV and games, and that also that BAFTA can share, and working with other organisations, as I know we did, for instance, when we did one of our screening programmes was around the portrayal of refugees on screen and the often very negative portrayal of migrants and refugees. But we couldn't do that on our own. It needed to sort of be a collaboration with other organisations. With our work with young people and in schools, we work with another charity called Place to Be, which is a children's mental health charity. So I think there's sort of many ways in which we can collaborate, and we can then use the awards to highlight, stories and things that actually give people a different perspective on the world. I felt incredibly lucky to be starting my tenure as BAFTA chair with such an amazing range of films as we had in the Film Awards this year. And when you look at a film like Zone of Interest, and the way in which that film makes you think about your own potential culpability in a situation in a different way is absolutely fascinating. So I think for us it's about using our soft power and having those conversations to understand what we can best bring to the table, through the charitable work, but also through our sustainability arm, our climate change arm, BAFTA Albert. Because there is a lot of work done there with the carbon calculator in terms of encouraging carbon neutrality across all productions, but also the power of storytelling when it comes to climate change. and how much impact that can have, and how it isn't always about wagging your finger at people. It's about embedding those storylines into popular dramas like EastEnders. And Albert's done quite a lot of research into this, that can really make a difference. You sort of just show people recycling in a series like that, and it will encourage other people to do it. It embeds.
Brilliant. I think, I mean, obviously this whole day is about collaboration, and sort of like, I think sometimes it can be underappreciated that there's a skills development sort of like that is required to really understand how to meaningfully, creatively collaborate, rather than have this sort of like basic transaction of information. And it is asking people sometimes to work in a different way than they used to. There's a fear that it's sort of like it will constrain. And actually, from our experience, from all the projects, and sort of like many of you here today, and certainly as Dom sort of like articulated very well, when we've been through that process with people, they find it sort of actually opens up the creative opportunities. And I've never come across an experience where there's been that creative collaboration where people haven't then wanted to do it. And we don't need to get involved often again because they understand how to do it.
And sometimes it's don't overcomplicate it. It's like Ian and I were introduced by a mutual contact only a few weeks ago. We had a really lovely, incredibly excitable cup of coffee in terms of we both wanted to sort of share lots of stuff, and then it was really about let's just do a thing. Let's do a thing. And you very kindly invited me here. And now, it's for me to hand over to the amazing BAFTA team who have an awful lot on their plate. And I run back to them with going, I've got another really good idea here. But just to see what further can come out of that. So it goes back to what I said first off. It's about community. And BAFTA is this amazing academy. We're not a private members club. Soho House is a brilliant private members club. We're an academy of the best talent across film, TV and games. And, I think we can do even more to leverage that talent individually and kind of community-wise in having those conversations with organisations such as yours.
Brilliant. And we're in a few weeks' time, we're due to publish the results of a research report that we commissioned through the pithily titled Entertainment Industries Task Force for Social Impact, which is led by Hannah Cantor, who's here in the room. And that research has been looking at how entertainment platforms define, approach, measure social impact, and indeed attitudes towards social impact across the entertainment industries. And without giving away too many spoilers, sort of like we found very much that most platforms across the entertainment sector do care about the impact of content being produced. And there's a huge appetite for better tools to measure the social and cultural impact of that content, an opportunity for future collaborations. I suppose with conscious of the time, but how important do you feel it is for creators to understand the social impact of their work? And secondly, how can we support that process so it does start to become more of a standard practice across industry?
I think, as you said, my impression is that people really do want to understand the social impact, and they want to get to a place where we all have confidence that, entertainment or entertaining an audience and having an impact on that audience are not mutually exclusive. It's not a choice you have to make, as we very much heard with Mr. Bates earlier this morning. So, we already at BAFTA, as I mentioned, with areas such as Albert, we do research, we do, have various ways of measuring the impact that, those climate change storylines, for example, might have, because in the Albert Consortium, I think there's nearly sort of 70% of the sort of broadcasters, streamers and kind of commissioners in this country. But there is a lot more that we can do. And I think it would be very interesting for us as an organisation, as for many others, to understand the impact of those storylines long term in terms of soaps and continuing drama. The portrayal of disability on screen, the normalising of taboos, in a show like It's a Sin. and even, you know, back to Mr. Bates, in potentially creating an environment where laws get changed and governments actually listen. So, you know, everything that you're doing, I think, is something that, you know, we would be very supportive of in principle and want to continue that conversation. And I guess my question to you is where do you want that journey to go then? What direction do you want it to head in?
So I think it's sort of like what we see as the opportunity gap, certainly sort of like from that research, given the interest and passion there is across the sector, and to some extent what we see, like the conversations often around the impact of entertainment still is sort of like around a case study led approach to reporting and demonstrating impact. It doesn't at the moment sort of like paint the full picture of just how much impact and the way that entertainment is like shaping culture and society, and it sort of like undervalues actually the role it's playing. And so one of the things we're sort of like are excited to be sort of like starting this conversation with BAFTA is the development of a broad framework that can support the work in industry that's already going on, like how people are currently measuring it, essentially an entertainment impact index that will allow for better collation of projects, of impacts that are being achieved, such that we can start to identify trends, patterns, gaps, yeah, that's sort of like that's the conversation which we're sort of like just starting out on now.
It really, really struck me some research that was done after I think last year's Film Awards, in terms of the BBC audience who just watched the Film Awards, that the mere fact of watching it meant that 2/3 of them were way more likely to go to their local cinema and consume films. So you just look at that as the way in which it can affect behaviours, and that's just a sort of tiny little corner of it.
We're out of time. Sarah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you so much.